The world we see is not always the world that is. We are divided by borders, by language, by history. But beneath it all, we are connected. Through movement, through exchange, through shared futures we are still trying to understand. Africa is often spoken about, as if it stands apart. But what if it has always been part of something larger? Not just a place, but a connection. Between people, between ideas, between worlds. Because development is not isolated, and progress is never built alone. It moves, across borders, through people, through generations. So the question is, what becomes possible, when we begin to see each other differently? This is Thinking Africa.
Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. It's the morning of February 3rd, 1969.
Right, a Monday morning, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You're sitting in a beautiful beachfront villa in the wealthy oyster-based suburb of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The air is heavy, it's tropical, and you are Eduardo Mondlane.
The founding president of FRELIMO.
Exactly. The Mozambican liberation movement fighting this just brutal, grinding guerrilla war against Portuguese colonial rule.
Which is a massive, incredibly stressful undertaking.
Oh, totally. So you've just driven over from your bustling headquarters to find some quiet time, away from the noise, just to sort through your morning mail.
Just a normal administrative task.
Right. And you unwrap a package bearing Moscow postmarks. Inside is a rare French translation of works by the Russian Marxist philosopher Georgy Plekhanov.
Which is a very specific, very tailored find.
It's remarkably specific. It perfectly matches your highly refined academic tastes. So, you open the cover, and the book detonates, killing you instantly.
The blast was it was completely devastating. It tore right through the room and left Mondlane's body barely recognizable.
It's terrifying.
It is. On a physical level, it was a targeted clinical elimination of one of Africa's most prominent liberation leaders. But on a historical level, it was actually the opening move in a massive geopolitical cover-up.
And that cover-up is exactly what we're getting into today. We are piecing together a Cold War puzzle that official history really tried its hardest to bury.
Because the official story is just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, it barely scratches it. We're pulling from a deeply compelling stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got primary FRELIMO documents from 1969, declassified intelligence dossiers on some notoriously brutal assassins, and a comprehensive academic study from the journal Cold War History.
Which is an amazing piece of research, honestly.
It really is. And our mission here is to look at the architecture of Mondlane's assassination and show how this deep multi-state betrayal actually happened.
Because it wasn't just a simple bombing.
Right. So let's start with the forensic breadcrumbs left behind in the wreckage of that beachfront villa. Because the bomb itself, it wasn't just a weapon. It was basically a psychological profile.
What's fascinating here is the sheer clinical sophistication of the device. It speaks directly to the resources of the people who built it, right? They essentially weaponized Mondlane's own intellect against him.
Which is so dark when you think about it.
It's incredibly dark.
Yeah.
Mondlane was this brilliant thinker. He held a PhD in sociology from Northwestern University. He had studied at Oberlin, taught at Syracuse.
He was a serious academic.
Exactly. He was a deeply intellectual leader trying to fuse grassroots African socialism with, pragmatic Western diplomacy. So the bomb makers understood that a rare Marxist text, specifically translated into French, a language he read fluently,
would be this irresistible intellectual vanity trap.
Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't hand it off to an aide or a secretary. He would absolutely open it himself.
It's basically the 1960s equivalent of a lethal, weaponized version of a highly targeted internet ad.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Right, they scraped his psychological profile, figured out the exact piece of content he would find irresistible, and just shipped it directly to his desk.
And the psychological manipulation extended to the packaging itself, too, particularly the return address.
Oh, right, the Moscow postmarks?
Yeah, the package bore stamps from Moscow. And the immediate implication there was obvious, right?
Yeah.
The Soviet Union had betrayed Mondlane for being too moderate.
Or maybe a radical Marxist faction within his own movement had orchestrated a purge.
Exactly. It was a textbook false flag operation designed specifically to misdirect the ensuing investigation.
Right.
But the Tanzanian Criminal Investigation Department, the CID working alongside Scotland Yard, they quickly discovered those stamps were crude forgeries.
They were fakes.
Total fakes. The forensic reality pointed in the exact opposite direction.
Because the investigators actually managed to pull intact fragments from the wreckage, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, the batteries used in the detonator.
Yeah, which is amazing police work given the destruction.
And tracing those batteries is what blew the Soviet false flag completely apart.
Right, because the CID and Scotland Yard, they traced those detonator batteries back to their manufacturing origin in Osaka, Japan.
Which feels like a dead end at first.
It does. But the critical breakthrough was tracking the distribution network. Those specific batteries have been sold by a commercial firm located in Lourenço Marques.
Which is modern-day Maputo, the capital of Portuguese-controlled Mozambique.
Exactly. So the physical components of the bomb came directly from Portuguese colonial territory. And we know this was a systematic campaign, too.
Because there were other bombs, right?
Yeah, in the weeks following Mondlane's death, Tanzanian police actually intercepted 2 identical Plekhanov book bombs addressed to Marcelino dos Santos and Urias Simango.
2 other senior figures in FRELIMO. So it was a highly coordinated decapitation strike aimed at the entire upper echelon of the movement.
Precisely.
But, okay, discovering the bomb's origin creates this massive logistical paradox. If the physical explosive was built by Portuguese intelligence down in Mozambique, they couldn't simply walk up to FRELIMO headquarters in Tanzania and drop it in the mailroom.
No, absolutely not.
There are international borders, military checkpoints, strict organizational security. Crossing that threshold requires a physical handover. It necessitates a severe internal breach.
And the dark logistics of moving that explosive from a Portuguese intelligence desk to an Oyster Bay villa reveals a terrifying network of collaborators.
Yeah.
Investigations strongly point to the Portuguese secret police, PIDE, acting in tandem with this shadowy intelligence front based in Lisbon called Agenter Press.
Agenter Press, they were an extreme right network.
Yeah, a militant extreme right organization connected to European stay-behind networks. They specialized in psychological warfare, subversion, and targeted assassinations, all aimed at crushing anti-colonial movements.
And the archives point to a very specific architect for this device, a Goan-born operative named Casimiro Monteiro.
Who was incredibly dangerous.
Oh, he had a brutal resume. He had already assassinated the Portuguese opposition leader Humberto Delgado in 1965. But even a skilled operative like Monteiro needed someone to open the door in Dar es Salaam.
Right. And to understand how that door was opened, we have to look at the bitter internal fractures within FRELIMO itself. The movement was undergoing what was known as the struggle of the 2 lines.
The struggle of the 2 lines. What exactly was that?
It was this severe ideological and ethnic schism. On one side, you had Mondlane advocating for a modern, multiracial socialist state. On the other, you had regional leaders like Lázaro Cavandam.
Oh.
Cavandam was a conservative for the Makonde ethnic group in northern Mozambique, and he wanted immediate ethnic-based control over the liberated zones and their resources. The tension was existential. I mean, Cavandam actually defected to the Portuguese military just weeks after the assassination.
Defecting after the fact shows serious intent, but Cavandam was a regional commander, right? He didn't have direct access to Mondlane's Daily Mail in the Tanzanian capital.
No, he didn't.
The person who did have that access was Silverio Nungu. He was FRELIMO's administrative secretary. He handled the logistics. He sorted the packages.
And Nungu's fate is honestly one of the darkest corners of this entire narrative. Following the assassination, Tanzanian police arrested Nungu as he was allegedly attempting to flee toward the Mozambican border.
Okay, so he's on the run.
Supposedly. But the official state narrative claimed that Nungu subsequently died of a, quote, hunger strike while in custody.
A hunger strike? In the middle of an assassination investigation involving international espionage.
It's highly suspect.
Yeah, that feels like a glaring bureaucratic euphemism for something much more violent, especially when we examine the primary source pamphlet written later that same year by FRELIMO's vice president, Urias Simango.
Right, Simango blew the whistle on that hunger strike narrative entirely.
He really did. What did he claim happened?
Simango published this highly controversial document claiming Nungu never starved himself. He alleged that Nungu was summarily executed by his own colleagues within FRELIMO's inner circle.
Wow, executed by his own people.
Yeah. The motive, according to Simango, was to bury internal secrets and prevent Nungu from revealing the true extent of the organizational infiltration during an interrogation.
The psychological weight of that environment is just staggering. Think about it. You are dedicating your life to fighting a vast colonial empire, but the immediate threat isn't a soldier in the jungle. It's the person sharing your office space.
The person sorting your mail.
Exactly. Quietly conspiring with your colonizers. But FRELIMO was operating in exile. They were based in Tanzania. And a liberation movement relies entirely on the security umbrella of its host nation. If the host nation is protecting you, internal infiltrators shouldn't be able to operate so freely.
Well, that assumes the host nation was acting as a unified sanctuary. Dar es Salaam in the late 1960s was famously nicknamed Rumorville.
Rumorville.
Yes, it was this paranoid hotbed swarming with spies, exiled freedom fighters, diplomats, and journalists. And the Cold War history study reveals an incredibly sensitive dynamic. Key figures within the Tanzanian government were actively working to undermine Mondlane.
See, I have to push back on the logic of this geopolitical dynamic. Tanzania, under President Julius Nyerere, was the premier champion of African liberation. Why would the Tanzanian state allow its own officials to sabotage an allied leader?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It's akin to inviting someone into your sanctuary for protection, only to casually hand a burglar the keys to the front door. It doesn't make sense.
It comes down to ideological alignment and the friction within Nyerere's own cabinet. The most prominent figure working against Mondlane was a man named Lawi Sejona.
Okay. Who was he?
He was a powerful Tanzanian minister of state operating out of the second vice president's office. And crucially, Sejona's office was officially responsible for overseeing refugee affairs and the security of liberation movements in the country.
Oh, wow. So he was effectively Mondlane's governmental gatekeeper.
Exactly. But Sejona shared a Makonde ethnic background with Mondlane's fiercest internal rival, Lazaro Kabandam. Beyond that, Sejona was aligned with a radical, Maoist-leaning faction within the Tanzanian government.
So they didn't like Mondlane's politics.
Not at all. They viewed Mondlane's moderate Western-educated background and his American wife, Janet, with deep, deep suspicion.
So the man responsible for FRELIMO's security is ideologically and ethnically allied with the people trying to overthrow FRELIMO's president.
Yep.
The conflict of interest is monumental, and the sources show Sejona actively countermanded Mondlane's security directives. Like when Mondlane attempted to discipline rebellious student factions at the FRELIMO Institute who were openly plotting against him, Sejona used his state authority to step in and protect the rebels.
He was actively undermining him at every turn. Dr. Helder Martens, who was FRELIMO's health director at the time, openly suspected Sejona of being directly complicit in the assassination plot.
Just by systematically stripping Mondlane of his institutional armor.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, bureaucratic sabotage alone doesn't guarantee a successful assassination. To eliminate a prominent figure without triggering an immediate, unmanageable public backlash, you have to prepare the battlefield.
You have to destroy the target's reputation first.
Yes. You need to create an atmosphere where the victim is isolated, where the public feels a sense of justification, or at least indifference, when the hit finally happens. And that requires controlling the media narrative.
Which brings us to the poison press in Tanzania. Because this wasn't just background noise, right? It was a highly targeted media campaign aimed at eroding Mondlane's moral authority.
It was relentless.
The charge was led by Nisa Kaizi, the editor of the state-owned newspaper, The Nationalist. The sources describe Kaizi as this Marxist true believer, and he utilized the entire weight of the state press to launch brutal editorials against Mondlane and his wife.
And the specific language Kaizi deployed was just devastating to guerrilla morale. He repeatedly labeled liberation leaders like Mondlane as, quote, Salaam parasites.
Salaam parasites, that is so calculated.
Very. The editorials painted this vivid, corrosive image of Mondlane sitting in air-conditioned luxury in the wealthy oyster-based suburb, drinking cocktails with white Western diplomats.
While the actual guerrilla fighters bled and died in the mud on the front lines. It's the ultimate delegitimization tactic. If you convince the rank and file that their leader is a parasite, profiting off their sacrifice, you aren't just critiquing his policy, you are turning him into a legitimate military target in the eyes of his own people.
It's psychological warfare playing out in the daily paper.
And this media intoxication campaign, which the Tanzanian state completely tolerated, systematically dismantled Mondlane's public security. It made the eventual cover-up of his murder incredibly effortless.
Well, the cover-up wasn't just effortless, it was structurally baked into the investigation from the moment the bomb went off.
How so?
Think about the timeline. The CSD and Scotland Yard actually do excellent concrete police work. They trace the Osaka batteries, they prove the Moscow stamps are fake, They link the bomb to Lourenço Marques and the Portuguese network.
They figured it out.
They did. They compiled all these explosive forensic findings into a comprehensive report by May 1969. And then protocol dictates they hand that report over to the government for action.
And the government body responsible for receiving that report was the second vice president's office.
Yes.
The exact same ministry controlled by Lawi Sijona, the man who had been actively protecting Mondlane's enemies.
The investigators basically handed the murder weapons blueprint directly to the people suspected of leaving the door unlocked.
That blows my mind. So what happened to the report?
The Tanzanian state immediately suppressed the inquiry. They kept the concrete forensic findings strictly silent for 3 agonizing years.
3 whole years.
Yeah. The public was officially left entirely in the dark, which allowed the fabricated rumors of a Soviet betrayal, or, internal FRELIMO bloodletting, to just fester and divide the movement.
Which was exactly what the bomb makers in Lisbon had intended all along.
Exactly. The truth only survived because a frustrated CID officer quietly leaked the details about the Osaka batteries and the Portuguese origin in secret to the U.S. Embassy.
Thank goodness someone leaked it. But if the cover-up was this deeply entrenched and the host country was this compromised, we have to ask how high the betrayal truly went within FRELIMO's own ranks. We've discussed the mail sorter, Nungu, and the regional rival, Cavendam. But the declassified PID archives contain an even more explosive allegation.
They do, yeah.
Before we touch on this, we need to pause here and lay down a massive caveat for you listening. We are absolutely not endorsing this next claim as absolute historical fact. We are impartially reporting what is contained in the Colonial Intelligence Archives.
Just illustrate the sheer depth of the paranoia and the suspected infiltration that plagued the movement.
Exactly. Because it is a necessary disclaimer. Intelligence archives are frequently weaponized with disinformation.
Oh, constantly. The allegation stems from Oscar Cardoso, the former chief of the Portuguese Secret Police, PIDE. Cardoso made a direct, on-the-record accusation regarding FRELIMO's chief of security at the time of the blast, a man named Joaquim Chissano.
Joaquim Chissano, a man who survived the internal purges and would eventually become the long-serving president of an independent Mozambique.
The very same. Cardoso alleged that Chissano actually collaborated with PIDE's Goan assassin, Casimiro Monteiro, to bypass internal security protocols and facilitate the hit on Mondlane.
That is a massive accusation. So what does this all mean for us trying to parse the truth decades later? Do we trust the word of a colonial secret police chief whose literal job description was to sow chaos and fracture African leadership? Or does the Cardoso allegation, even if exaggerated, reveal a terrifying underlying truth about how power was actually consolidated in the shadows of the revolution?
It perfectly illustrates the historian's dilemma. Cardoso had every motive to smear Chissano, right? To delegitimize the future leadership of a newly independent Mozambique by branding them as accomplices to murder.
It's the perfect parting shot.
Exactly. But the logistical reality of the assassination required high-level internal cooperation. The bomb successfully bypassed FRELIMO's internal security checks. So while Cardoso's specific accusation against Chissano might be a calculated lie designed to poison the well, the broader reality that senior FRELIMO figures were engaged in a deadly, cutthroat power struggle that enabled the assassination is undeniably true.
And that power struggle didn't magically resolve itself when the Portuguese Empire collapsed. It culminated in a tragic, brutal postscript. Fast forward to 1975, the guerrilla war ends. FRELIMO is victorious. Mozambique gains its independence.
It should be a moment of pure triumph.
Right. But the new leader of FRELIMO, Samora Machel, hasn't forgotten the struggle of the two lines. The internal paranoia from 1969 carried over into the foundation of the new state.
Upon independence, the surviving FRELIMO dissidents who had historically clashed with Mondlane and Machel founding members like Urias Simango, Lázaro Cavendam, and Paulo Gumane, they were rounded up by the new government.
Just swept up.
Yeah, they were transported to the Nachingwea military camp in southern Tanzania for what can only be described as theatrical show trials.
The imagery of those trials is just haunting. These were the men who helped start the revolution. They were paraded before young, newly minted military recruits. They were forced to stand up and read public, scripted confessions of their ideological betrayals and their alleged complicity in the reactionary plots that killed Mondlane.
It was pure political theater.
And once the spectacle was over, they were taken away and secretly executed.
This raises an important question about how history is recorded, and how national identities are formed. The victors write the history. For decades, the official narrative surrounding Eduardo Mondlane's death was a simplified binary story of a great hero martyred by an evil colonial empire.
A neat and tidy story.
Yeah, and while the Portuguese Empire was undeniably the orchestrator of the violence, that simplified story serves to completely erase the uncomfortable truths.
It really does.
It erases the active complicity of the Tanzanian host government. It erases the bitter, lethal infighting within FRELIMO itself. And it erases the fact that the post-colonial state was ultimately forged through the execution of its own founding dissidents.
When we zoom out and look at the synthesis of all these sources, Eduardo Mondlane's murder stands as a masterclass in psychological targeting and information warfare. It was a perfect, terrible storm where Portuguese colonial intelligence, Tanzanian state complicity, and internal FRELIMO betrayals all aligned perfectly.
They all needed each other to work.
Exactly. The fake Moscow stamps and the media smears about Salaam parasites weren't just background details. They were the very mechanisms that made the physical assassination possible and the subsequent cover-up successful.
It serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of truth. It demonstrates how easily a movement can be fractured from within when external paranoia is successfully weaponized by state actors.
And how quickly those internal fractures turn lethal. It fundamentally changes how you look at the neat, clean narratives we are so often sold. History is so frequently presented to us as a simple story of pure heroes and absolute villains.
But the reality is always messier.
Always. When you look at the founding myths of any modern nation, when you look closely at the bedrock, you have to wonder how many other deep, unresolved compromises, forced confessions, and secret betrayals are buried right beneath the surface of the official record, just waiting for a deep dive.
It really makes you reconsider everything you read in a textbook.
So the next time you read about a clean, binary moment in history, remember that package sitting on the desk in Oyster Bay. Remember the rare French translation of Plekhanov. Sometimes the most perfectly tailored narratives are the exact ones designed to blow the truth wide open. Thanks for joining us.